And I'm very excited about my guest tonight. He is the former relief pitcher for the New York Mets and with the Boston Red Sox and Milwaukee Brewers. He even played for the Seattle Pilots. And his name is Skip Lockwood, and he's got a brand new book out called Inside Pitch: My Life as a Major League Closer. And he's here tonight. Skip, thanks so much for coming on Mets Musings.
It is wonderful. Gary, thank you for having me. The thrill to be back this close to New York again. I remember New York very, very kindly. We had wonderful years there. We had a house in Greenwich, and Tom Seaver was my ride to the ballpark. We had friends. We just had a blast. I enjoyed playing at Shea Stadium. I pitched okay, and I got a chance to pitch in important games. I just love New York, and in many cases, I wished I had still stuck around. I miss it. I miss New York. I miss the people. Miss Broadway.
And you had a short but a very nice career here in New York, and not a bad ride to the ballpark coming in with Tom Seaver.
No, Tom was very instrumental. I think a lot of players that played with Tom will tell you the same. He was a guy that got up on your grill. He was a guy that could teach. He was a guy who was psychological, thinking very clearly about the psychological components of the game. I think he was way ahead of his time in preparation, physically and emotionally, mentally for every game. He really left no stone unturned. He went to the ballpark every single day with a purpose in mind. Everything he did seemed like it was designed to help him pitch better, to help him think about pitching better. He was really a mentor for me and very inspirational in many, many different ways. I enjoyed being around him. All I had to do was listen sometimes. He was confrontational sometimes with me. He was a guy that was a clear leader for me, and a guy that I thought influenced my career an awful lot.
Now, in your book, you speak about how you prepared for a game, and you did a lot of, and I don't know if there was a lot of it going on at that time, but you did a lot of mental imaging. Can you speak a little bit about that and how you got into that?
Yes. The book is an attempt to be authentic. What I try to do is write the book, and I wrote every word of the book myself. I try to speak as if I was taking you with me out on the mound. It's with you and I are throwing the pitch. You're inside the uniform. You're gripping the ball. You're feeling what it's like to be out there. I try to be honest, and I try to do it with a sense of humility. But I wanted people to, just like you would ask somebody if you were at a bar someplace, what is it like to go out on the mound? What do they say in the dugout? So the book was an attempt to take you with me on my journey. Part of my journey was good, and part of it was great. The part that was good was in Milwaukee and in California. I pitched okay, starting pitcher for the Brewers, and I had some pretty good games. But I never really turned it into something that I could count on and something that was repeatable. I really didn't know why I was pitching well. And then I started to uncover ways to relax and visualize what was going to happen on the mound, and use that visualization as a tool. Very specific, very detailed. I was very much in tune with how the movie was going to play of me pitching, and I would watch the movie of me pitching before I would ever go out and pitch the game. It was something that I prepared every day. I prepared every batter. I prepared every pitch. I saw Tom do it, and I saw how he did it, and I tried to learn from him. I tried to learn his techniques.
And quite interesting in the book, as you say, you do go into this, and do put us in the place of the mound and the whole thing, and it's very fascinating the way you did that in the book. And I didn't realize that you had actually made you were originally drafted and signed, I should say, because there was no draft in those days, but you were originally signed as an infielder and actually made it to the major leagues as an infielder.
Well, yeah, I did. I signed as a third baseman right out of high school. And it's hard to know, what level you're at, whether you're high in or you would be high in the draft or not, because the draft was coming the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had, bird dogs and scouts and, people from the front office would come and follow the game. And I had several teams were interested in me. And my father, I think, got a case of cigars or something like that. And the Kansas City A's came in last. They signed me to play infield. Ed Charles, if you remember, was the third baseman.
The glider,
for the
sure.
Great, the slider, exactly. He was a great guy, great third baseman, and so he was, getting a little older, and they wanted somebody to come in and replace him eventually. So I got a chance to, and it was a bonus protection rule. If you remember back then, they were trying to get around some of the big bonuses, so there was a disincentive for teams to sign players and give them money. So they had to keep me with the big league ball club. So Catfish Hunter and Joe Rudy and Raleigh Fingers and these guys that were signing had to stay with the big league ball club. So it wasn't as if I actually made the ball club as an infielder. They had to keep me and protect me that way. I played a few games. I didn't play very well. But what I did, I played in the big leagues at third base.
And then you made the transition to a pitcher. You struggled. I guess to quote a Clint Eastwood movie, you had a little trouble with the curve and went went back down and came back as a pitcher.
Yeah, in the minor leagues, once they get your number, it doesn't take them very long to find it out. They put a little wrinkle on the ball, and man, I was swinging for the fences. I swung at the balls and took the strikes for a whole year in the minor leagues. It was clear to me that I had to do something. It was either go home or get something else in baseball to do. Charlie Finley was the guy that had signed me originally, and God bless Charlie. He gave me a chance to stay with the ball club and stay with the organization, go back to the minor leagues, and become a pitcher. Bill Posdell was the minor league pitching coach at the time, and Bill helped me. I had to learn a windup. I had to learn how to grip certain pitches. I always had a great arm, so throwing it hard wasn't a problem, but getting it somewhere near the strike zone was. So I tried to learn to be disciplined and get a repeatable windup so that I could find a strike zone, and I did. And I made myself into a pitcher. I had God-given gifts, but you had to work hard. The minor leagues are no place for people to struggle. So I was lucky. I was one of those lucky people that had a chance to come back, from third base to becoming a big league pitcher and play for 12, 13 years.
And of course, you mentioned Charlie Finley. Charlie was quite a colorful character that probably people don't realize nowadays, the younger baseball fan, but we can remember the donkey and everything else that Charlie had with the Kansas City team and eventually moved to Oakland. Yes, folks, they did play in Kansas City at one time. And then you went on to another quite how would you word it? Iconic, colorful team, and that was the Seattle Pilots. Tell us briefly a little bit about playing with the Seattle Pilots in 1969.
Seattle was everybody's dirty dozen. The teams all had to protect certain members of their roster, and the unprotected players went into a draft. Those players were drafted by Seattle. And they made up the Seattle team. So by definition, was the teams that the other teams didn't, the players that the other teams didn't want very much. ended up in Seattle. We had a very interesting team. Yeah, they were good guys, but they weren't name ball players, and nobody came to the ball game to watch us at '06 Stadium. You could actually introduce yourself to everybody that was there in some nights. Um, when I arrived there, it was in the transition from third base to pitching, and if you remember, Rich Rollins was the third baseman for the team. So in spring training, I got my glove and I went down to third base. I started to shag some balls at third base. I thought I was a third baseman. When I got the contract in the mail, it didn't tell me what position I was going to play. It just gave me a salary. So I'm shagging balls with Rich Rollins down at third base. And the pitching coach yells out to me, Lockwood, get out in the outfield with the rest of the pitchers. So I said to Rich, well, I'm a pitcher. And to this day, he probably thinks I'm crazy. But I really didn't know what position I was going to play with that team.
Now, was that team as colorful as Jim Bouton made it out to be in Ball 4, or was there some exaggeration there?
No, Jim Bouton wrote a very tame book.
Okay.
He left out the good stuff. The thing that he wrote was he wrote people's names down, and that was the shocking part about it.
Right.
That named people, and the team shenanigans were far more than that. They were a crazy group of guys. Joe Schultz was the manager, and he was quite a guy himself.
Now, as a young man, I guess that was kind of, was it shocking in any way, or did you just kind of roll with the punches?
Yeah, I was there for a half a year. I wasn't there for, for a good long period of time. The big leagues is the big leagues. You get a big league uniform, you're in the big leagues. And I had a cool hat and cool name, and I just like being in the big leagues. I had a chance to play with that team. And then the whole team got sold to Milwaukee. If you remember, the last week of spring training. So what was shocking was, as a Seattle pilot, we all thought we were going back to Seattle. The bus, the truck, actually had left from spring training with all the gear on it. So all the bats and the balls and the players' luggage and everything was on its way to Seattle, but the team was sold to Bud Selig in Milwaukee. And so the team left and went to Milwaukee, and we didn't have any uniforms. And we didn't have any bats. We had no bases, baseballs. Had no hats. We didn't have anything. The clubhouse guy actually took the name pilots off of the spring training uniform and superimposed Brewers over that so we could play our opening day, which was at home in Milwaukee. It was cold in April.
Wow.
And you could see the name pilots underneath the name. He didn't get them off real well. Yeah, that was a crazy team.
I'll tell you that's very interesting that they'd go to that extent, but I guess they couldn't get anything made that quickly.
No, they didn't have time.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of weeks before we actually got a regular uniform. They were rushing it. I don't know who was making it, McGregor or somebody was rushing it through. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any stuff. Nobody had any luggage or any of our clothes because that was all on the way to Seattle at the time. So we actually had nothing. We didn't have reservations in the hotel.
Wow.
It was, but Milwaukee was a wonderful place. And I played there for almost 5 years, and we lived there. And I grew to love it. I was cold, but it was a safe, beautiful, lovely people. I maybe drank a little bit too much beer, but that was a great place to play. I'm so happy. I think they deserve to be a National League team. it was very much of a National League franchise.
Yes, it always was with the Braves, and then of course now they're back in the National League. They have been for a number of years. Um, but then you go from there to California. So from the cold to the warm.
Right. I went out to play with the Angels. This was Frank Robinson, Frank Tanana, Nolan Ryan, Bobby Valentine. We had a team full of notable ball players. I still don't remember why Frank Robinson wasn't a player manager for that team. He certainly should have been. Nolan Ryan was on the team. I saw Nolan Ryan pitch a no hitter. Um, this is the most incredible pitcher that I've ever seen in my life. Velocity was unbelievable. His curveball was so sharp and deadly. He was just unhittable. Um, he was a real tall, raw bone, strong guy from Alvin, Texas, and he could throw some heat. Well, I tell you, he was just remarkable. Frankie Tanana, Bill Singer, Frank Robinson. We had a team full of great ball players,
Hmm.
and nobody came to those ball games. I mean, it was in the same parking lot as Disney World. We actually shared the same macadam as the parking lot for Disney World, and it just wasn't an interesting place for people to come. So many distractions out there. There's so many things, other
Yeah.
things to do. We didn't draw very well. And I played 1 year out there, had to go back to the minor leagues for a brief stint, and then ended up with New York.
And you came to New York, and of course, really had some success here. A lot of success in New York as a reliever and a closer, and you talk about that in the book. And but in your days, it was a little different. You pitched more than one inning.
Oh, no, you pitched for sure. Uh, when you got to the ballpark, if you only got away with pitching an inning or so, it was like a day off. We had great starters. We had Seaver and Kuzman and Matlack. Craig Swan was there for a while. Pat Zachary. We had very, very good starting pitching. Bob Apodaca had the job as closer for the Mets, and he and I used to kind of committee, as a closer by committee for a while. And we used to have to pitch, 3 or 4 innings. And if you pitched 3 innings one day, it didn't mean you had the day off. You might have to come back and pitch another inning. But it was fun. You want to pitch in games that are important. You want to get the ball when the game is in your advantage. And even if it's a seventh inning, I'll take it and pitch 9 outs. I don't mind.
Hmm.
I really didn't mind pitching 2 or 3 innings. Today you've got the specialty and you've got the middle relievers and the setup guys, and the closers are only going, a short, inning or so, and sometimes only to right or left-handed batters. We didn't have that. we just pitched. Joe Torre didn't care whether it was a left-handed batter coming up that I was going to face. He wanted me on the mound, and that was the thing that was so important to my career. Is there's a manager that wanted me out there, and a team of guys that had confidence in me. So it made a big difference in my career, my psyche, and how I approached the game.
Do you think with all of this specialization today, is it uh, better for the game, or it just seems like there's a lot more injuries and arm injuries, and I wonder if it's any of that is related to all the specialization, or because you guys threw a lot. I mean, like you said, you throw 3, 4 innings and then come back the next night and throw maybe 2 or 3, and now they do one, but they do everything at such force. What's your feelings on that?
The games today has changed, and so there's a couple of things about the way the game is played today that is different. First of all, they don't pitch to the strike zone
Hmm.
the way we did. Seaver taught me to get strike one, curveball, fastball, or something like that. You need to get strike one on the batter. Today, when I watch the game or when I go to Finland, I see them play. The first pitch is a changeup. The first pitch is a forkball. The first pitch a lot of times is unhittable. They don't pitch strike one. They'll show you a fastball on the inside part of the plate for a ball, or they'll show it to you away or high. Now, they won't give it to you in the strike zone. They're going to come back with a forkball or a changeup, something that they want you to hit. And so they play a zone defense against you, and they move the infielders back and forth. We never did that. I don't know if the players have as strong an arms as we did, because we threw all the time. They're very specialized now, but these guys are big. They're strong. These guys, there's a house. They rip the uniforms so that they can get their arms into them. These guys are enormous, well-conditioned athletes, and we weren't. I mean, we did our jobs. I roomed with Mickey Lolich. Mickey was never accused of being a great athlete. He was a great pitcher, but he was out of shape, But he could sink that fastball in on your hands. Today's pitchers are different. Whether it's the cause of a lot of arm injuries, I don't know. I'm suspicious that these kids threw too early, too much junk when they were in Little League. Mm-hmm. I teach kids, don't throw anything that curves until you can shave. Don't try to throw a forkball or any of these things until you really know how to throw it, because you're gonna hurt yourself. So my suspicion is that the reason that there's so many injuries is not the work that they get in the big leagues. It's the problems that arise from too much throwing curveballs and breaking pitches at too young an age.
And there's so much now with the travel teams and that kind of thing that it wasn't around back in the day. And I think you're right. I think that all adds up to it. We used to break and play football or play basketball, and I'm sure you did the same kind of thing in your day. And now it just seems that some of these guys are just they're just playing baseball all year round.
No, for sure, and you would too. I mean, if you can get a $5 million contract without ever putting a uniform on, and if your specialty, I was a closer, that pays good money today. Those guys are getting $10 and $15 million. It makes you focus. It makes you work hard at trying to become a big leaguer if you can. It's certainly, I don't have my kids. I had 4 girls and a boy. They played sports, but they weren't really into baseball. Mm-hmm. So, but if my grandchildren come along, I would certainly encourage them to play as much baseball as they possibly could. It's a great game, and I don't think it's getting any boring. I think it's a great media game, great for television. I really enjoy watching it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not crazy about all these changes they're trying to make about pace of play and all that sort of thing, but we'll see where that all leads. Now the book is just full of great stories like this, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed it. I finished it in a day. It was so entertaining, and I hope everybody goes out and gets it. But just let's talk a little bit about some of your impressions of some of the Mets that you played with. Now, a couple of them, unfortunately, some of your teammates are in ill health right now, and Ed Kranepool has some health issues, and Rusty Staub and Bud Harrelson just came out and said that he's suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Tell us a little bit about those 3 guys, if you will.
Well, Kranepool was the elder statesman with the Mets. He was a guy that we all looked up to. He was a New Yorker. He knew everybody. Joe Torre had an open clubhouse, so everybody was in the clubhouse. We had friends in the clubhouse, kids in the clubhouse, actors in the clubhouse, band members in the clubhouse. Kranepool had an entourage. He always had people with him. I thought he was the glue that held the team together. He was a guy that would come to you and help you. He was a leader. He was a guy that quietly would would come and say to you something in the outfield about how you were pitching or something. Um, he had a deal with Joe Torre that I thought was exceptional. Joe said to Eddie Kranepool, I can't start you every day, but what I can guarantee you is I can guarantee that you're going to get the bat in your hand when there's a runner on base and we need a run in the eighth or ninth inning. You're going to get a chance to hit in an important situation. And that made a difference to Kranepool because he was always in the game. He was always there. He wasn't grumpy. He was a great leader. And I take my hat off to Joe Torre for helping him, find his role as a pinch hitter, with the Mets. Staub was a different kettle of fish. Rusty Staub, the Grand Rouge, was elegant, confident, purposeful. Everything that Rusty did looked like a ballet dancer sometimes. His socks were high, the uniform was perfect. Mm-hmm. He was a guy that he showed you how to play. He did it so you could see the right way to play. Very precise in all of his actions, and as you know, was very philanthropic. Mm-hmm. After his days were over with the New York police and other things that his charities. I think both of those guys have kidney failure. Rusty, I think, is bad mm-hmm. In the hospital on dialysis. I think that Eddie Kranepool, the last I heard, he was waiting for a transplant or something like that. I don't know which one, who's got the worst case of it here, but here's two people that I know and love that, having trouble with one particular thing. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as Harrelson goes, I just found out in spring training that he declared that he had some kind of early Alzheimer's or something like that. Mm-hmm. Buddy was an interesting guy. Buddy, having Buddy in the infield was great because he always wanted the ball. I remember whenever he came to the mound, it was never to talk about hitters or anything like that. He was there to try to see how I could throw a pitch on the inside part of the plate so he could bail me out somehow by getting a ground ball double play. He was always a guy that was, call him a gamer. He wanted the ball. He wanted to play important games. He was an inspiration. We became close friends. Real good guy. We're so sorry to see that he's not feeling well.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure to meet Buddy Harrelson and Ed Kranepool just in passing, but they were very nice guys and really ashamed to hear that. And of course, I watched them growing up and as a young man, and it's sad to see this happening now, but I guess it happens to all of us, and that's the aging process.
Well, I'm not buying into that analysis yet, but I think Kranepool, an interesting thing about Kranepool that people don't know is we had a kangaroo court with the Mets, and it was a serious deal. It's $100 for mm-hmm. for wearing the uniform improperly or not bunting a guy over or embarrassing the ball club, with some kind of mistake was a serious amount of money. I got fined for walking off the mound with only 2 outs one day. So it was a very serious kangaroo court, and occasionally visited by Willie Mays, who was hilarious, and he was a funny guy. That he was a coach on the sign-up sheet, but I don't know whether he did much coaching. But he was a great person. Right?
Well, you really had played with or played against some of the biggest stars in baseball. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of them: Catfish Hunter and Willie Mays and Rusty, of course, and in your book you talk about Hank Aaron and those guys. And You've really had a very terrific career, and uh, why the book, and why at this point?
I had the time to write it. I've been working doing different things all my life, and um, I had a chance. I was very motivated to write down some of the stories that I thought were funny, and some of the stories I thought were more serious. Um, the way I thought about this book was I wanted to show people a game in slow motion. I wanted to show them baseball like inside out.
Mm-hmm.
This is what a player thinks about. This is how a player goes about it. The player doesn't pitch one inning a night or start one day a week. The player's always a pitcher. You wake up in the morning, you go to lunch, you go to dinner. You're always thinking about that pitcher or a hitter about swinging that ball. It's not a one time a day thing. It's something that you live and you become. You breathe it. If I threw a pitch at 8 o'clock at night at Shea Stadium, I bet you I threw that pitch 10,000 times that day before I ever got to the stadium. There was something that you practice. It became real. I wanted the book to be a book that tells stories, just like if you sat down at a bar with me, that we could talk about baseball. I could take you with me. I could bring you out there. People ask me, what is it like to go out there? This is what it's like. The book tells you what it's like to be on the field.
And it certainly does. And as I said, it has tons of great stories. It's really a fun read. It's a very interesting book. I think you did a great job with it, Skip. And I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. It was really a pleasure having you on and talking to you about your career.
Gary, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Stay out of the snow.
Okay, yeah, we'll try to do that.